737 Nashville's Morning News on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Appreciate you listening with Johnny B and Joan Jones. I'm Dan Mandis. How are you? Guy is listening from the Kentucky-Tennessee border. And he says we're a little staticky, but he appreciates all that we do. Don't forget, you can always listen on the myriad of apps that we have. You can also watch us or listen to us, whatever you want, on Facebook and also Twitter, Twitch, 997WTN.com, so on and so forth. We are all over the place. So if you want to listen to us static free, you can always find us online. Matthew Hurtt is joining us on the Super Text line, Super Talk line. And Matthew, how are you?
You know, it was a pretty good weekend for Donald Trump. That Joe Rogan interview has already racked up 33 million views on YouTube and millions more on the various platforms where you can find it. But I'm sure we're going to talk about Kill Tony at Madison Square Garden last night. So I'll let you run with that.
So it was funny, Matthew, because Johnny and I just during the break were trying to figure out, okay, so how many people have watched this thing? I mean, it's millions. So I got a couple of things. Number one, Joan and I were talking earlier, and I was surprised to learn. I'm not somebody who reads Politico a whole heck of a lot, but she's telling me that Politico has the winners of the day, I guess, on a daily basis. And she says that by and large, Kamala Harris, even over the last couple of weeks, where it is clear that she's the loser of the day, they're still calling her the winner of the day. How can any publication look themselves in the mirror and say that Kamala Harris is a winner of the day when you've got Donald Trump at 33 million views or watches or whatever with this interview with Joe Rogan, not to mention that incredible rally last night?
Well, Politico is written by folks in the swamp, for folks in the swamp. I can't imagine its readership expands too far beyond the Beltway here in Northern Virginia and Washington, D.C. And it is the kind of affirming, quote-unquote, journalism that people expect to read up here. But you're absolutely right. Donald Trump has had the last several weeks, he has been at rally after rally. He has appeared on a number of podcasts in this space, in sort of the Tony Hinchcliffe, Joe Rogan, Theo Von space, and seeping into the culture in a way that picks up those voters who don't pay attention to what's being published at Politico and who don't pay attention to what's happening on, the headline news in the evenings.
Matthew, I want to play you a piece of audio. It's turned into my favorite piece of audio of the day. This actually aired on MSNBC when they're walking around and talking to voters.
I've heard so much about Trump being angry and he's a fascist and a dictator, but problem is when I listen to him, I don't hear any of that.
The stunning thing is, Matthew, that aired on MSNBC. That clearly wasn't live. So they chose to air that, and I don't know if it matters to anybody, but that guy is black, and he looks like he's about maybe 45, 50, 55 years old. And basically, that's MSNBC sort of admitting that a good part of their narrative is a bunch of BS, because the guy's saying, all y'all do is talk about how he's Hitler, and then I listen to him talk and he's not.
Well, J.D. Vance did a couple of podcasts over the last few weeks, and Trump did Joe Rogan. And when you read the comments, in the comments section, I normally advise people against, but it is a lot of comments that sound like this. Donald Trump sounds like a normal guy. J.D. Vance sounds like a pretty smart guy, pretty normal guy. And that's what we're seeing when we break down the facade of whatever the mainstream media has built up, the way they lie about these two gentlemen, the way they misconstrue the truth, and people actually hear their words and get a vibe for their sentiment, how they communicate. It is completely different than how the mainstream media portrays them, and more people are seeing that in the last 8 days of the election.
Do you know what I've noticed is that, and I think that people are probably kind of like me, where there's great audio out there, and I'm not going to play the whole thing right now, but you've probably seen it. J.D. Vance and Jake Tapper, and they are going back and forth, and basically it's J.D. Vance calling out Jake Tapper and CNN for their faulty reporting on Russian collusion years ago. And J.D. Vance is letting Jake Tapper have it. And Tapper, he starts getting, his voice starts getting higher. He starts getting really defensive. Same thing with Kirsten Welker. It was a really good weekend for Jake Tapper. One of the things that I'm noticing, Matthew, is that it's almost like become sport now for J.D. Vance to start taking out these reporters and these esteemed news anchors, where he's calling them on their BS. And I think there's roughly half of America. We're watching this as sport. It's almost like wrestling, where our favorite wrestler is, throwing the enemy down to the mat. It's become something, at least for me, something that I look forward to, seeing J.D. Vance put these reporters and anchors in their place.
The first big broadcast with J.D. Vance on a Sunday show, you and I came in the next week, and I said ultimately the same thing. He is surgical in the way that he actively listens to the question. Yep. He will debunk or refuse the premise, and then he will explain exactly the position that either Donald Trump or the campaign has taken. And it is so refreshing to see someone who can so articulately meander and navigate through the mistruths and lies and miscommunication of the mainstream media to tell the American people the truth. And a couple of million people may see it on a Sunday morning, but then these clips go out and people watch it, they talk about it, they hear about it on a program like this, and it really sets the tone for the remainder of the week for what it means or what the campaign is trying to put out there. J.D. Vance is an excellent communicator. We saw it at the vice presidential debate, and we see it almost every Sunday. It's an excellent thing, and if and when these two are elected next Tuesday, J.D. Vance should spend a bunch of his Sunday mornings on these programs talking about the administration's agenda.
You and I spoke at great length about the fact that the media was trying to portray this mega rally at Madison Square Garden. Front page of the New York Post today was mega Square Garden. And I think that the media, they keep going down this road of Donald Trump and this rally being, sort of like a Hitler kind of rally, a fascist rally, and all that other stuff. And I think that it's going to backfire on them. It's because, as I mentioned previously, people are watching these rallies, they're listening to these clips, and they're realizing that this is not being advertised appropriately by the Democrats. This is Tim Walz yesterday.
Donald Trump has descended into madness over the last few weeks. And I think some of you don't miss on this. Go do your Google on this. Donald Trump's got this big rally going at Madison Square Garden. There's a direct parallel to a big rally that happened in the mid-1930s at Madison Square Garden. And don't think that he doesn't know for 1 second exactly what they're doing there.
What a putsy dolt. That, of course, is Tim Walz. But you hear him, and he's bloviating BS.
We are in the final days of a flailing Kamala Harris-Tim Walz campaign, and what we're seeing now is this desperation and fear in trying to equivocate Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. And what it appears as though is this attack is falling flat on the American people. You just played a clip of an African American gentleman on MSNBC who seemed to break down that and reject the notion by just saying, he seems like a normal guy to me. And more people who watch these events directly say, Donald Trump seems relatable. J.D. Vance seems relatable. None of these attacks, or very few of these attacks, are going to land, and it just desensitizes people to the actual problem and to our actual history of the Holocaust and the threat of Nazi Germany in the 1930s. It does a disservice. And what we've also seen at the end of last week, there was a really good video of a Holocaust survivor who basically said, "How dare you, Kamala Harris, compare Donald Trump to Hitler?" The gentleman in the video said, "I survived the Holocaust, and this is absolutely a terrible comparison," and indicated that he was voting for Donald Trump. So I think these attacks are falling flat. I know from a call with the Trump campaign last night that Kamala Harris is frantically moving staff from other states to Virginia because Virginia is in play. Okay. And so we are seeing things, we're seeing the campaign moving in real time very quickly in states like Pennsylvania and Virginia and Michigan, where Muslim leaders came out in support of Donald Trump over the weekend as well. Yep. The tone is changing very quickly, and we're moving toward an election day where Donald Trump may very well surprise voters in a number of states.
The gentleman you're referring to, 94-year-old Jerry Wartsky, and I've got that audio that you're talking about. I'm going to play it coming up in the next hour here on Nashville's Morning News, because you're right, that is so impactful, because he basically says Kamala Harris, and it goes right into what you and I have been saying, Matthew. He accuses Kamala Harris and Tim Walz and all these other people of sanitizing Adolf Hitler by comparing him to Donald Trump, knowing full right well that Adolf Hitler killed 6 million Jews. And you have the Democrats saying, oh, Donald Trump is just like Adolf Hitler, and you're sanitizing Hitler. That makes you, meaning the Democrats, incredibly anti-Semitic. And I love what Wartsky says, which is the Democrats owe the Holocaust survivors and their families an apology. Now, it would be great if somebody would actually ask Kamala Harris, will you apologize? And you can ask the same thing of Karine Jean-Pierre. Do you apologize for, equating Donald Trump and Adolf Hitler? I would love if somebody would actually ask them the question. Real quick, our Real Clear Politics, it looks like when you look at the battleground states, this is not good for the Democrats, because in the battleground states, you look at Michigan, Pennsylvania. Michigan, Trump is up 0.2. Pennsylvania, 0.5. Wisconsin, Trump is up 0.3. Arizona, Trump up 1.5. North Carolina, 0.8 is Trump in the lead. And Georgia, 2.3. I mean, it's been going up steadily. And you think Trump is going to ride this all the way to Election Day, knowing that it's still too close to call?
As we've talked about this before, one poll doesn't tell us much, but a series of polls show a trend. And
Real Clear Politics.
These are a series of polls and an average that show a trend where Donald Trump is peaking at just the right time. I was a little concerned a couple of weeks ago that he was going to peak in mid-October, but this seems to be trending in the right direction, where we have early voting is going on. Republican turnout is higher than it's ever been. Even in Virginia, early voting, there's an 18-point swing for in-person early voting in favor of Republicans. And we're seeing this all over the place. And I think as we go into these next 8 days, it is important for the campaign and for activists and supporters to put their foot on the gas and keep doing what they're doing, to get as many of your friends, if you're listening to this, as many of your friends in Tennessee and around the country, to go out and vote. I think this election is going to shock a lot of people, but we've got to do our part.
Yep. Absolutely. All right, let me ask you, some people are saying that in our closing moments here, some people are saying that we'll actually know before November 5th if Donald Trump is going to win or Kamala Harris is going to win simply by the early voting. In other words, if we look at Pennsylvania and the early voting, I don't know how Pennsylvania exactly does their early voting, but if we start to find out that Pennsylvania is definitely trending in Donald Trump's favor, knowing that early voting by and large has been a Democrat thing, and Republicans coming out on voting day, election day, is more of a Republican thing. What do you think? When will we actually know if Trump is, going to win this campaign? And it all hinges, of course, on Pennsylvania.
I'm not quite ready to put my money on that assessment, but the polls close on the East Coast in a number of states at 7 p.m. That's when they close it in Virginia, and we will start to know by 8 or 8:30, which is 7 or 7:30 for most of your listeners. And if the numbers look good in Virginia, if they look good in Pennsylvania, by 10 o'clock Eastern, we may very well have a pretty good idea. If Virginia, North Carolina, and Pennsylvania seem to be falling for Donald Trump, then what we're going to see is Michigan and Wisconsin and Nevada and Arizona and Donald Trump. Again, I don't like making predictions, but if he runs the table in the first few hours, it will be a very good night for Donald Trump.
All right, but then the question is, what about overseas ballots? A lot of people are making a big deal about the overseas ballots. Also, over the weekend, there was a story about all of these ballots that were found in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, that turned out to be fraudulent as well. So, and by the way, Trump took Lancaster County in the last 2 elections. So, does that worry you? Does that concern you? These overseas ballots suddenly coming in almost like a ballot dump? And how concerned are you about voter fraud in Pennsylvania?
We have to keep an eye on these, and luckily the Republican Party and Chairman Michael Whatley has built out a robust operation to tackle voter fraud and ensure election integrity in these states. If you see something, say something. And I think that we've got enough folks on the ground to keep an eye on that sort of thing. I am less concerned this year about Pennsylvania than, say, in 2020, where unelected bureaucrats changed the rules in the middle of the game.
Yep.
But it is certainly something we want to keep an eye on.
Matthew, how can people find you on Twitter?
I'm on Twitter at Matthew Hurtt, MatthewHurtt.